Good day, good people. You're listening to Lifted with Carrie Lee on this gorgeous first day of Sun in Gemini. And I have a very special guest today. Well, I always have a very special guest, but I'm sitting here with Jacob Nordby. He is an author, speaker, overall incredible human being, in my opinion. He is the author of Blessed Are the Weird, a Manifesto for Creatives, which is one of my favorite books that I like to go back to when I'm feeling like maybe I'm not up to snuff for myself. He also is the author of The Divine Arsonist, A Tale of Awakening, and his third book, The Creative Cure, is currently in the editing stage with Hierophant Publishing. Welcome to the show, Jacob.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here. By the way, speak for yourself on a beautiful day. We've had biblical levels of rain here in Boise this May, and it's really wet outside, which is fine. But I just want to point out that all weather is local, you know.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? You did have some really beautiful April weather, though.
We did. We're paying the price for it now. It's the gods were like, yeah, we gave you enough, and now you need to settle into misery like the rest of the country.
Right. We have to keep you balanced.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's a certain pleasure index that humans think when they're having a good time. Oh, this will go on forever, and they're like, that's just defying the gods. The gods are like, no, you get some, and then the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Experience a little bit of bitterness with the sweetness, right? So I have to tell you, I've been following you for quite a few years now on my old account from when I was doing Lifting the Veil, and then back onto my new account with Witchcraft and Alchemy. And I have to say, I love watching your posts because you're a lot of fun. You're really great with your words, and then the best parts of everything always come in the comment section. You have some great fun in your comment section, and I love that you keep things light. How are you able to do that, especially in these times?
Oh, I mean, mainly I have a stack of plates for throwing, and so I walk away from the computer sometimes and throw the plates because, yeah, because sometimes people are really dumb, okay, here's how I feel about people, Carrie Lee, is every person is beautiful and unique and all of that. But whenever people get into a larger group of like more than two, they start putting on armbands and marching and shit, and then they get really dumb. So when I say people, I'm not talking about, whichever one of your listeners right now is listening going, oh, well, I'm not really dumb. No, you're not really dumb. But if you are identifying with a larger group of people like fucking vegans or whatever, then all of a sudden you start telling me your dogma. So in general, though, I either try to be sarcastic with folks, which is a way of not being mean or not very mean, and then I just have people like you and some others who I can count on to keep it real.
Have the levity there too, right? That level, the levity that you bring to the situation, and individuality, because what you're basically saying is the minute that you get involved with group think, you've lost yourself.
Well, right. Then it's no longer unique, and people talk a lot about, their opinion and I don't know. And what that means to me, though, is, I said something that is sure to piss some folks off, fucking vegans. I don't mean that, but I do mean it in the terms in the sense of vegans being a group and militant and dogmatic, just like any other group that becomes militant and dogmatic. What a lot of people don't know, because I haven't posted it anywhere, is I just chose to go meat free recently, which came for me from the experience of my cat, who I named Jackson the Feral, who was a feral cat in my neighborhood, and he came into my house and got sick and died a couple months later. And I kind of have a hunch he was already dying and wanted a safe place to come and be, fed and warm for a few months before the end. But I took him to the vet, and he was just way too sick. And I had my hand on him, Carrie Lee, and my daughter did too, Megan. as the life went out of him. And of course we were sobbing, and because this guy meant something very much to us. And as I stood there and felt that heartbeat, fade away, I realized something that none of the other, documentaries or books or anything else on the topic had been able to get through to me, and that is, life is so precious. And that point has been with me for a long time, but having that experience helped me realize how numb and disconnected from life in terms of reverence for these creatures I had become. And so I can go to Whole Foods or Winco or wherever and get sterilized, nice little packets of meat and bring it home and cook it and eat it, and it's delicious. But that was last year, and that began this process of going, this questioning, this honesty for myself, and saying, can I keep living that way, numb and disconnected from the heartbeat of life, and say things like life is precious and I have reverence for life? And so for me, it's this very personal choice, and this is actually the first time I've talked about it in public. And I feel like that kind of thing, when it becomes a deeply personal choice, not just about meat-free or not, but anything, now we're tapping into, this is who I am, and this is real to me, and then it matters, and then it's no longer anybody else's dogma.
Well, you're not raising up someone else's flag in order to show up for yourself.
Right.
This is something that is yours, and it's not something that you've gained from outside of yourself. It actually came from you, so that makes it yours.
Yeah, I think that so many people have, and I do too. We're all tribal creatures. We want to belong to a tribe, but so many people feel lost and without a sense of inner direction, that it feels good to sign up for a group that seems to be doing good or seems to be in line. And so I don't make fun of that impulse, but I do feel that a lot of times, a lot of what we see has less to do with, this is who I am and this is being aligned from my inner self and what I would really love. And it has more to do with virtue signaling. It says, if I do this, then that means I'm a better person. And hey, look at me, this is what I'm doing. And again, this goes so far beyond the question of whether or not to eat animals. It's really a whole life thing for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's something that, you're not sitting here, this is the first time I'm hearing it. So it's not something that you're definitely not virtual signaling. This is something that you're doing, as I said, for you.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about this in my first interview. I was saying how in different movements, you find that, and I just, that word alone, but you find that a lot of people that are gathering to them, it's because they're missing something. I know myself, whenever I was jumping on any bandwagon, it was because I wasn't doing something that was inner work for me.
Yeah.
And I would just jump onto something, and I'd end up carrying, like I said, a flag for somebody else because it was worth something.
Mm-hmm.
But I was kind of just distracting myself from my own work. And it wasn't until I kind of realized that and withdrew from it all to do the work. Not that I'm done it, but at least I have this, I don't have a need to jump on anything. I don't have a need to attack anything. I don't have a need to say, this is the way, because there is no way. And there's a real truth behind the idea of to follow anybody else's path is just a trap.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I feel, by the way, I'd like to turn this around a little bit.
Absolutely.
Because you talk a lot about, your practice of magic and witchcraft, alchemy, and I know that has become very popular, much like, any other group, but it feels like it's very real to you. And I would love to hear, what does being a witch mean to you? Where did it come from? How did that begin for you? Because by the way, I'm not asking that from outside. I actually practice my own work with magic and witchcraft and things, and once again, don't talk about it in public very much, or if ever.
I appreciate that. I really do. The question is a good one. I started moving with the seasons, and it was basically for me, it was connecting to the earth and connecting to the rhythms of everything and listening and watching nature. I am a hunter's daughter.
Hmm.
And my father gave me a really good connection to the land,
Hmm.
in a bunch of different ways. And I think that after having children, something changed in me, and it brought out the deeper mother in me, if that makes sense. The more connected mother. I was paying attention more. My intuition started to really get loud, like louder than it's ever been. And I started seeing coincidences that you can't see as coincidences anymore. And I started to feel relief from releasing to
Hmm.
the earth and treating the earth like it was the entity that it is, and gratitude for everything around me. And then I think listening to the stories of like my great grandmothers and my grandmothers, and seeing that there was a tie to the past, pagan, animist, tribalist way, even through the Catholicism and the Christianity and whatnot, and learning to break free from it, um, and connect to something that was natural and balanced and that followed some kind of natural law instead of going against it. And I felt like I was coming home. I'm not even sure if that answers your question.
No, I think don't have an agenda with the question. Just really curious because once again, what I've seen from you on social media and elsewhere, it feels like a very real thing to you. It is to me, and so I like to know where these things come from, and I'm curious how you would define, or not define, but describe what is witchcraft for us today. And I'll give you a little background for my question. So I feel like the Cartesian split, Descartes, father of modern science, I think therefore I am. We began to split our experience of life and the world from this mystical and in many cases superstitious, a lot of that, but then humans, especially Western humans, went down this long path of science, and we began to treat the world and our bodies and ourselves like machines. And I feel like we're having
Absolutely.
a tremendous return right now. So I'm curious what it means to be a witch in the modern age when we're not going back to superstition, but we're finding some things we've lost. What does that mean to you?
So it's interesting for me because even the word witch, as much as I use it, I think I use it because that's what people grasp.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's witchy. Yeah, and I've been told that since I was very young, and I don't even, it's just like, okay, that's the word, but it's just a natural thing. Witchcraft is just going back to nature. I think it's folk medicines, folk knowings, the old wives' tales, without the superstition, but understanding that behind the superstition there was a warning, there was a subliminal message, or there was some kind of teaching that needed to be understood. I really miss, well, I don't really miss it, but I have a love for the old fairy tales and the way that they present this beautiful symbolic painting that gives you these lessons in life that you can really take away, instead of making it all fluff and pretty where, things need to be saved and hearts are broken and the whole nine yards. It's dirt and it's grit and it's real. It's not bibbity bobbity boo, you know what I mean? It's the movements of the water and it's the movements of the earth, and it's understanding what happens when lightning hits the ground and the plants are shocked and their life force is ignited. It's fucking power.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think it's interesting to hold a spot right now where those of us who are willing to do it, I call us line walkers, so a foot in each world, and that's a very difficult thing to do because it's much easier to say, I'm all about science or I'm all about spirituality and mysticism or whatever. And those of us who are willing to walk the line between those, it means a lot of tension because it's a very interesting, both sides want to tug, and there's a lot of magnetic sort of pull from each world. And I just feel that being able to say, look, I love and respect everything that science has brought us, and it has helped us get rid of the bullshit superstitions and it's dismantled. It's in the process of dismantling the patriarchy, and it's all of these
Yeah.
things, which, that's a funny thing to say because science has been very patriarchal, but here we are. So I just feel like those of us who are willing to walk with a foot in each world we're remembering parts of us that were lost.
I think this is about balancing the two as well. It's funny that you say a foot in both worlds because I say that all the time. Either that or I'm sitting on the fringe of the fringe of the fringe. But the idea of having a foot in both worlds is kind of ninja-like. And it's also the idea of trying desperately to get these worlds to marry each other. Because I can see the value in quite a bit of this science if it practices natural law. And I know that might kind of rub some people the wrong way because I'm not trying to come off in a patriarchal sense, but in bashing the patriarchy, and I know it's not great as it is, we're forgetting that it's supposed to be an amalgamation of both things. And as women are, certain women are running through going, yeah, the rise of the feminine. They're forgetting that there's this balance of the masculine that needs to happen too in all of us and everything. So for me, it's bigger than just, down with the patriarchy, but let's marry the two.
No, I agree. I feel like the world, we've gone through cycles of, the most current story of the world of history is dominated by patriarchy in most places, but probably prehistory, pre when we were writing things down or whatever, there were no doubt cycles of matriarchy. And I feel like the world was asking us right now to not flip over, not go back. My friend Heather Ashamara, she leads this amazing women's movement, and she reflects a lot of the things you just said, which she said, anytime an oppressed group in history, anytime an oppressed group gains power or takes their power back, most of the time, in most of the examples we can find, they actually begin to take on the attributes of their oppressors. And so
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot of women who are rightly so taking power back from the patriarchy, but it's like, oh, you're doing the same goddamn thing that you hated so much.
Absolutely. This is something that we've talked about too. It's like they're just taking it and turning it into a feminized patriarchy, which is yuck.
Yeah.
It's really it's a little terrifying, but I mean at the same time, this is what we're seeing when we're trying to balance it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Balancing things out is not easy. Walking a middle path is not easy. I'm a Gemini. It just isn't fun.
God, I'm surrounded by Geminis. I have twins who are Geminis, which is, you just can imagine. Yeah. I have a couple of dear friends who are Geminis, and a sister who's a Gemini. My dad was a Gemini.
Yeah, we're
So
just
I've
good to
learned
have
quite a
around.
bit about that. How does it, by the way, how does it feel to be a Gemini? That must be something else.
It's fantastic and frustrating all at once. Um, I can honestly say that it was really good. Back in 2012, I started to really understand my natal chart.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding the other parts of what I am made more sense because I'm a Sagittarius rising and a Capricorn moon. And so that Capricorn moon saves my life.
Dear God, that's a lot of power there.
It's as long as it like I wield it the right way, and usually it's just about for me this is my journey and I'm trying to work out my stuff. And with all of my Gemini stuff, I just have to compulsively share it as I go, which to some is maddening and to others is helpful, and I have no cares.
My daughter and my sister were sitting in the living room talking the other day, and it's pretty fascinating to listen to Geminis talk. It's like a different level of conversation going on. Fun to listen to, but I wasn't going to try to insert myself a whole lot.
Four for the price of two.
Yeah. Oh my God. So, well, and by the way, I know that your audience is going to be comfortable with, astrology and some of these things, just because that's the world that you're very much speaking from. what's interesting to me is that a lot of people glance at it and say, "Oh, well, that's part of the whole superstition thing." And if if you look at astrology, then you're part of the superstition rather than science. And um, what a lot of people don't know is that Carl Jung did thousands of charts, and he respected astrology as a deep personality study. And and I think a lot of people look at the horoscope, maybe in the paper or online or something. Oh, well, that's not even true, or barely true at all, and don't realize that the depth of the personality study is really incredible. And you just mentioned your moon and rising. When I learned that my moon is Leo and my rising is Sagittarius, that actually helped me flesh out the picture and go, oh my God, now I'm looking at myself in a mirror. So it becomes real self-discovery.
Absolutely, absolutely. It gives you a grander scope. It. I had read somewhere that we're born. No, well, no, we're told you don't come with a handbook, but you do. You have this star map that's available to you, and it would be such an interesting thing if we actually looked at these star maps and tried to work with them with our children as we're raising them, as we're teaching the kids, when we're looking at the jobs that we want. If you look at my chart, if my father and mother would have understood that, maybe they would have never said to me, well, writing is something that you can fall back on. you know,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been more, oh, here's a pen and paper and typewriter and go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really, seriously, go. Yeah, I think that's well, and Carrie Lee, I've come to such a feeling of this process. People talk about transformation a lot, and before I run down that one, what does the word transformation mean to you?
I love this interview so much. Who's the interview? Who's the interviewee? Transformation to me is like forever cocooning and coming out of it a butterfly over and over and over again. It's relearning and throwing the old stuff out and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and always reaffirming and refocusing and reconfiguring. It's a constant rebirthing process. It never ends.
Yeah, yeah, I love that.
And how about you? Seeing as you're
Well,
asking all the questions. I
no,
love it.
I just feel like this is where it's getting juicy, because transformation has come to mean for a lot of people, I'm looking for a model of my best life, and I'm broken, but if I can find somebody who's clearly living a good life and model them, then that's what transformation means. So we look outside of ourselves. And by the way, we were trained to do this through socialization, becoming, and that's the funny thing for me, Carrie Lee, is that it's a very natural process. It's not like the devil or something, this evil empire is doing this to us. We have to learn through imitation. So it's natural that we become socialized and forget who we really are. But at a certain point, the call from the inner self to say, wait a minute, there is something true in you. But back to religion, so much of the world that we see right now is formed and based upon the idea of original sin. And I'm talking about places outside of religion, marketing, self-help, personal development. A lot of it has to do with basically you're broken and need a savior. Yeah.
Always. They're always a savior outside of yourself.
Yeah. And and I work in marketing, books and things, and so it's interesting to find a place in that says, how can I offer things that are true without continuing that message of you're broken and need a savior, because I don't believe it. And so it's, for me, transformation, once it comes back to not that model, but I guess the easiest way, since we like to talk about earth things, is imagine an acorn, and inside of that acorn is the code for an oak tree. But it doesn't look anything like an oak tree yet. And it may or may not ever become the oak. It may not fulfill its potential to become an oak tree, right? So it needs to transform, but it's not transforming to become, the acorn doesn't sit there on top of the ground and glance around and say, oh, that pine tree over there is tall and grows fast and people like it and get tattoos of it on their skin, you know? So I want to become a pine tree. No, the acorn just sinks down into the earth, is broken down, cracks open, and the codes within it help it become a tiny version of an oak tree. And like you said a moment ago, it then goes through this seasonal, slow, and not just seasonal, like microsecond by microsecond process of becoming more and more and more of what it already is. And to me, that is the essence of transformation, finding out who we are. So self-discovery is the first part. Who am I? Self-acceptance.
Absolutely.
The more that I learn who I am, the more I'm able to say, oh my God, I'm really interested in that guy or that woman. I walked by the mirror the other day, several months ago, Carrie Lee, and caught my own eyes. It was kind of going past through the room and caught my own eyes, and I was stunned because the words that came out of my mouth I had never had happen before. Spontaneously, I said, I love you. And it was so weird, all alone in my house.
I love that.
Right? And of course, I'm sure you and probably everyone we're talking with right now has read books and done self-love exercises and all that. So it was so amazing for me to have this experience that just happened of like, oh my God, I really do love myself. And it was through a process of self-discovery. And so self-discovery, who am I? Accepting that deeply, not sitting there like the acorn sitting there looking over there and said, Jesus Christ, if I could just become a pine tree and oh look, I grow so slowly, and or if we take it in human terms, oh my God, I don't have a thigh gap, and look at her over there and she's so smart, and look at how she shows up on Instagram and
Right?
all this. Because that sort of thing always keeps us out of the process of our own transformation of realizing our own potential.
Absolutely. I think the biggest strides I've taken myself were when I went, I don't care. People have, there's been well, why do you write first thing in the morning every morning? Like, who reads that? I don't care. I do that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've used my social media space as a journaling space for myself. And the more I do it and the more I don't care about reactions or likes or whatever it is, the more I realize that I'm just good with myself. And being good with myself shows me different parts of me that I've been hiding out of fear for judgment or, oh my God, I can't do this thing. Like, okay, I never did my own podcasts. I had an editor. I would record, I would send it off, never touch it again, never listen to it again. So the idea of doing all of this was a little bit daunting. And Sunday I recorded, and then Tuesday I put it all together in a video. And when I was done, I was proud of myself. And I looked over at my husband and I was like, I am so proud of myself. And I didn't feel sick to my stomach for the first time in saying that. That was huge. Usually pride for me and feeling good about something I've done has given me this sick feeling. And I'm like, well, maybe that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I recognize that, no, that's not okay. And I don't feel it now. And that's huge.
That is huge. Just out of curiosity, how were you raised religiously?
Oh, Roman Catholic.
Okay.
With heavy superstition on the Hungarian side with ghosts and all of the things.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
you?
oh, I was raised in a Christian cult.
Oh, joy.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting that my mother and her side of the family were deeply Roman Catholic, and I would occasionally go with my great grandfather to mass when I would visit him in Portland, where he lived, and I loved it. It was so different, and I also loved the tapestries and the imagery and all the stuff because I didn't grow up with any of the baggage from it, so to me it was also all magical.
Well,
But
yeah, and it's very pagan.
oh yeah, very pagan. My God, people don't realize
Absolutely.
that. You know, but it's interesting. I'm curious, what wounds do you feel like you picked up, and not just from Catholicism, but sure, start with that. But as a child, what would you say some of your deepest wounds were?
Okay. Believing and trusting in my own self. Definitely. Like I had to have somebody always tell me that I was doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that'd have to be the best one. And and thinking that there's something wrong with me because I'm female
Mm.
and trying to like masculine up that stuff so that I
Mm-hmm.
could be a little bit tougher.
Mm-hmm.
And then thank God I realized that I don't need to do that. But at the same time, I was teaching myself a balance of it all without understanding that. That's pretty big. But I would honestly say doubt, self-doubt. It just so much self-doubt and unnatural understanding because the Christian faith is based on unnaturalness. It goes against nature. I can't. That's the thing I think that bothers me the most about it is that there's no real true connection to a natural process in it.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, let's just go there. See if you can see if you can find a moment. Just and your psyche will serve something up that may or may not make sense. But see if you can find a moment where, when you learned that you couldn't trust yourself or that you shouldn't trust yourself. See if there's an actual scene in there.
Yeah, there is, but it had nothing to do with me. It
Hmm.
had to do with how I made the other person feel in doing the thing that I did that was awesome.
Okay, yeah, tell us
Oh, really?
if you're
Um,
willing.
so the
This is
first time I
paid.
sang, the first time I sang was in church. And when I, s- I have a powerful voice, and it's been compared to gospel before. And the entire congregation turned around, and I was never allowed to sing again
Why?
because I sounded too full of gospel.
Hmm.
I was like they made lots of comments about me sounding like a colored person, which really hurt my feelings quite a bit because I didn't think that that was necessary, and I didn't see color, and I was really upset about stuff like that as a kid. It really affected me. Um, but yeah, I think that was one of the first times where I was told that I couldn't do something that I did very well, and I was chastised for it because like I don't, and it made me feel dirty somehow.
Hmm. So paint the scene. What look and speak from first person, like present tense. This is you now seeing this, because I would like us to really feel this. Look around you and just pick out what you notice about the where you are when this happens. You know, what's on the walls, anything that comes up.
I can okay, so the choir was on top at the on the balcony level, and it was the time for me to sing, and I can remember the entire congregation whipping around and everything just being as it was. And the church was beautiful, and I was just I was happy. I was making a joyful noise.
Hang on just a minute. Hang on. Try, because I want us to really enter into your body with you and look
Okay.
through your eyes and feel this. So say, I'm happy. So tell us the story as if it's happening right now.
Okay. I'm holding on to my book, and I am standing tall and my shoulders are back, and I open my mouth and I sing, and I'm smiling because I'm just so happy, and I get it. I'm ready to cry.
Yeah, yeah.
And as I'm singing, all of these people turn around and whip their heads, and I honestly remember the women, and they're looking at me and they're scowling.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where it stops, and I put my head down.
What do you smell right now?
Perfume.
Hmm.
Like all of mixtures of perfume. And okay, so it's silly. I'm seeing things like I'm not seeing things like they're kind of, so I'm seeing things like they're a 1920s still kind of,
Hmm.
but it's not. Like the women are all dressed up in their furs and their whatnots. And those looks are like those silent film looks when they turn to look at me. That's how it feels.
Hmm. What are you hearing right now?
my voice,
Mm-hmm.
and my joy. I can hear my joy. And then I feel silenced.
So that feeling of silenced, where is that in your body?
Choked up in my throat and my heart.
Uh, Describe it a bit. What color or shape or texture is it? Temperature?
So it's hot and yucky. It's like a ball with knots in it.
Mm-hmm.
And my chest wants to burst and it feels like it's not allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a pressure, it's a big pressure that just wants to let everything out.
Mm-hmm.
Colors, I don't see colors.
Mm-hmm.
I see color, but I see white light like around everything as if it's hot, like white hot.
Mm-hmm. If that feeling could talk to you right now, if it can you ask it its name?
Fear.
Mm.
And what's that feeling that comes with being judged? It's a smallness,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like you're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But you know you're like, it's that knowing that you did this thing and it was good and you practiced and you did all the things and everybody told you it was going to be wonderful and then it wasn't. So I feel like I was betrayed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a betrayal.
Oh, wow. Just why don't you see if betrayal would sit next to you for a moment and see if you can see if betrayal is willing to tell you what it needs.
Don't care about me. I don't matter in the end. Not me, the betrayal. But in
Mm-hmm.
the end, it doesn't matter.
That's how it's feeling right now.
Yeah, it's okay that I felt those things. Like, it's okay.
Why don't you see if betrayal is okay with you putting your arm around it, and yeah, let's see if that works first. Is it okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you ask it to tell you what it needs? What do you need?
Acceptance.
Hmm. What would that mean? How would I do that? How would I accept you? How would I help you feel accepted?
To understand that it's okay to be let down. And there's a lesson from it. It's a lesson.
What does it need from adult, strong, out there Carrie Lee right now? Right now.
To never let anybody feel that way.
Hmm.
To never make anybody feel that pain.
Hmm.
That's what that means.
Hmm.
To not repeat the mistakes of those elders that should have lifted that child up.
Hmm. So it will feel protected and seen if you do that.
I think so.
Hmm. Does that have anything else to say? Anything for you or for any of us to hear?
It's kind of funny. I needed it. I needed to go through that. I needed to see that. I needed to feel that. I needed it to be my friend for a time in order to become and let go.
Hmm.
And that it's okay. It's funny. We hold on to things, but we don't have to hold them so tightly to create a detriment from them.
Yeah.
That there's pieces of them that really want to teach us and love us back into understanding that it was just an experience.
Yeah, and I mean, you just really led into, and by the way, I just want to kind of really honor the sacred space of going back there and talking to that part, as you just have and shared with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like it because it's a thing. It exists, and it needs to know that it's respected for showing up like this. Um, because Carrie Lee, as we started talking about religion and our religious backgrounds and the wounds and things, you talk so much about transformation and alchemy, and I think people sometimes hear these words and they're just concepts, but what we just went through together is an experience of alchemy. And not that you as yourself now, were needing to be fixed or healed or anything like that. It feels like you've done a lot of that work already. But I want, without any, plan or preconception about what was going to happen, I feel like being able to walk through an experience of alchemy is really powerful, because my sense is people wonder what their purpose is. What's my true gift? What's my purpose? And over time, what I've noticed in my own life and then in working with other people, the gift is hidden in the wound. Healing the wound reveals the gift, and that's alchemy.
It is, because you're taking something base and turning it into something beautiful. I have this this lot in life where certain creatures come into my existence to show me things, and they're not always nice. And but I take the shit that they give me and I create from it. I make something better from everything that's given to me, and I always will, because if I didn't, then what am I here for? I can't see another way. I can't see another way but then to take something that take the dirt in my garden and grow beautiful vegetables from it. I can't help but watch the plant die and take the moment to see how it's going back to a form that's going to give sustenance to something else. I truly live in that state of understanding. I mean, obviously not always. I'm a goofball too, but it's like that's my medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and once again, I feel like people pick on a word like witchcraft or alchemy or transformation, and when I say pick on it something about it calls to them, and that's wonderful. But what we're doing here, what we're just talking through and feeling, that's when it is no longer a concept. This is when it becomes a real thing. And one thing that I can't know, but that betrayal, that feeling, I can't know whether for sure past lives are true or not. I've certainly been informed by things in that way, but I would, and maybe you already know, but I would be curious if that has resonance to maybe times you've experienced that in other lifetimes.
Well, it's interesting. I have my own astrologer, of course I do.
Hmm.
I love her. She's wonderful. Her name's Sarah DeHaven, and she's going to be my next guest, actually. And she does adept guidance. It's deep astrology. So she's talking about a lot of the asteroids and whatnot on the outside, not just your planets. And I found some really, really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. One of my planets, I think it's in the first house. It's not a planet, sorry, it's an asteroid, and it's Cassandra. And funny enough, my parents were going to name me that. But in Greek mythology, Cassandra, Apollo was in love with her, if I'm not mistaken, and she didn't want anything to do with him. And so he cursed her tongue so that all of the prophecies that she spewed, which were absolutely true, everyone thought was a lie.
Mm.
And it's kind of interesting because that was a bit of the lot in my life as I was growing up. I was always, nope, Carrie's lying, when in reality I was just the scapegoat or the gaslit creature. You know what I mean? So I do see lots of interesting things in astrology and the idea of past lives. I feel like, and I've been kind of guided to understand that I'm kind of here reliving it all kind of rawly, to experience all of those feelings from all of those past lives all over again. I'm also a 9 in numerology, so I think I'm like trying to do a lot of work in this lifetime, and for myself as an example, but not with that kind of ego, if that makes sense, because I'm compelled to share. Like if I shut up all my words inside of myself, I actually think I might explode.
You know, somewhere I wrote, and I can't remember where, but the era of suffering saviors is over. And but that doesn't mean that people don't show up with the same kind of energy that a, you know, Jesus Christ or, you know, any of these others that are escaping me now showed up to have a big message that was transformational, and people aren't going to understand it. But I really feel like we're in an era during which heresy is important, and it's also, yeah, like but it's not the same. We're less likely in this particular high renaissance that we're living in right now. And I know a lot of people get, you know, triggered by that idea, like, no, this is the worst time in the world. Like, no. This is the highest point that we have, that as far as we know, that humanity has ever reached. And the question is, can we take a step forward together and actually step into our creator selves, our truly creative selves, and do something together? Because in the past, the waveform of history has been, you know, high renaissance in Italy, high renaissance in Asia, high renaissance, during which technology and arts and freedom and sexuality, sexual freedom, and all these things, you know, really rise. They explode. But almost always, Carrie Lee, there's this deep plunge into a dark ages after a renaissance. And I've been curious for a long time. Can we do this? Can we take a step forward without having to crash all the way back down and, you know, crawl back up the mountain?
It's funny that you say that. I kind of feel the same way, but I don't know how we can go into a dark ages unless we just absolutely destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I just can't see it. I think that we're too smart. I think we're too creative, and I think, like you're saying, we're in a creative explosion right now. More people are going back to just the idea of handmade things, and crafting with their hands, and going back to listening to podcasts. That's massive. My son came down, 14 years old, and he says to me, Mom, I'm listening to this podcast about cults and Scientology. And I'm like, yeah, that's fantastic. You know, we like the storytelling. I turn on CBC radio once in a while so I can listen to some of their old-timey radio plays that they have. I don't know what you even call those, but where I miss stuff like that. I think that kind of thing is great. But you see more people that are creating now and not going back to basics. But I think there needs to be some kind of, like I said, some kind of marriage between tech and basics. I don't know. Where do you see that?
Yeah, you know, I just read this book, Sacred Economics, by Charles Einstein, and one thing I loved about it is that it wasn't this hippie, you know, manifesto against capitalism, but it was very much pointing out that capitalism is part of humans' evolution as a species, and that we are actually right at the point, almost like if you think of all of humanity as a single creature, it's been in infancy and childhood, and now we're reaching the point of, can we grow up and treat our mother with respect and treat each other with respect? Because it's no longer just the, you know, 15-year-old with, you know, hormones bursting and like, look at my big muscles or look at my big breasts or whatever. You know, now it's humanity is trying to say, oh, this is what it would mean to live in a different way and be a member of the community known as this world and this galaxy. And so I thought fascinating that he laid out some ideas about how that might come to be. And I feel like this time we're in right now, where this invisible creature called COVID-19 showed up out of the blue and fucking wrecked everything, you know?
Right.
put a pause on everything. And it's funny that my astrologer, I haven't talked to her for some years, but her name is Melinda, and she pounded into my head several years ago. 2020 is going to be a massive year of change. Don't forget that. Save your money. Keep your lifestyle. She said because it's going to wreak havoc on so many structures, politics, business, finance, everything. And it was funny, Carrie Lee, earlier this year, I was, right in the middle of doing a ton of work and finishing this book. And I don't watch the news. Stuff shows up on social media sometimes like, oh, wow, I guess there's something happening. Anyway, but I noticed that the stock market was booming and the economy was just on fire. And I wondered in January of this year, I wonder if Melinda's right. I wonder what could come along to make this such a year of transformation that she talked about and that would wreak havoc on stuff. And, then I went to Mexico to see my brother for a week and came back, and there was nobody in the line in customs in Dallas, Fort Worth on my way back. I mean, not anyone ahead of me and not anyone behind me. It felt like walking through a scene of The Walking Dead, like, holy shit, this is actually okay. So watching it as it unveils itself, I'm like, okay, fucking Melinda was right.
Yeah, it's funny. We'd been preparing for the idea of things that could transpire in 2020. And so for the first 5 years, it was soapboxing. And then it turned into going within. Like, I mean, literally, my family just went, okay, we're done out there. We're going to do these things on the inside and take a lot away from the outside stuff without, it's not like we left society. I don't mean that. I just mean that we refocused.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped worrying so much about certain things that were going on. But when this hit, and it was weird, I was going to start the show in January, and I ended up with laryngitis and this horrible, who knows what it was, flu that lasted for like 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was brutal. And
what do you think?
I think it was because of everything that I've read up on it. I mean, this is going to be gross, but so I'm just going to say it all. Mucus was so bad and so thick that it would coat the inside of my throat, and I couldn't get it out. Like coughing wasn't a cure. It was really not. And it was mucus from your sinuses draining down and coming up from your chest. And there were times where I thought I was drowning, and the sweating and the fevers, and thinking you're getting better. And it was like 2 o'clock every day, I'd start to remember that I was sick. And it was it was strange. My palms and the soles of my feet were sweating for hours at a time, like just ridiculous. And I couldn't decipher what was menopause and and what was sickness. And I was just like, well, I'm just going to hell in a handbasket now. But I mean,
probably on account of that witchcraft you're into.
Yeah, right. It's been, but at the same time, I mean, I took the time to get healthy, and I did the things I needed to do to get healthy, and I don't know what it was, and I'm not afraid of it either.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about anything. All I know is that I love the outdoors. I miss cooking for friends and family. But I also appreciate the way that I see things changing.
Yeah.
And I also see that there's a way that we can direct it.
Mm-hmm. I feel so strongly that we're in a time of, at least we have the opportunity for this really radical realignment to our souls, to our inner selves. For example, here's an example of that. I had a house cleaner, and loved having her show up a couple of times a month. And it had been, I think, a couple of years she was doing this for me, and it was wonderful. And then, the pandemic hit, and she couldn't. And then 2 or 3 weeks ago, I get this text from her, and she said, Jacob, I've had a month off, away from all the chemicals and doing what I did, and I just feel so much better. And I'm finally listening to my husband and my doctor, because they've been telling me for some years that it was unhealthy for me to be immersed in chemicals and dust and other people's shit every single day for a living. And she said, so thank you for everything, and I'm not going to come back. I'm not sure what I'm doing next, but I'm not coming back to it. And the very first thing that came to my mind or my heart was just, oh, good for you, genuinely, because now I have to clean my house like a peasant again. But until I find
Yeah,
someone.
sure, but that's great for her, though, eh?
No, but I was so happy because to me it's a very simple evidence, and this wasn't a big metaphysical or spiritual conversation we were having, but to me that's a very practical evidence of someone taking the time and then feeling into their bodies and going, oh, this isn't right for me anymore. And I know many, many other people right now whose jobs are changing or maybe gone, or maybe they've just decided, you know what, being at home with my family actually is pretty fucking wonderful. I don't want to re-enter the anxious pace, and be part of that all the time. So I don't know exactly what's next, but I know that I have to redo something. And to me, Carrie, this is a wonderful creative opportunity. And people think of creative, as making things, doing things, and it is that. But to me, the meaning of creativity is deeper. It's the life energy, and it is what creates everything around us. And therefore, reinventing, recreating our lives so it feels true, so it feels lined up with the inner self. Going back to that childlike self and saying, what I do this exercise with people. What is something you loved to do as a child? And I have them do something similar to what you did earlier around wounds, and just, okay, well, paint the scene for me. How did you feel? And they're like, oh my God, but there's such a big gap between that feeling and what I do now, not just for a living, but my whole life. And I'm like, okay, well, when we
That's the
boil.
medicine.
What's that?
That's the medicine.
It's the medicine. And Carrie, what's interesting is that joy, if we go back to before we knew anything about life or the rules or what success was or any of it, the creature who showed up here wanted to experience everything and wanted to experience joy, wanted to experience the joy of living. The French have a phrase for it, joie de vivre,
Yeah, and that wonder.
Yeah, and that becomes the compass then. And so we've had a chance to pause as an entire planet, which is crazy.
It's amazing because we've been asking for it.
We've been begging for it, exhausted.
Right?
Please let me rest.
Exactly.
But in that pause, which is so uncomfortable, goes against so many patterns and beliefs, scarcity beliefs, how will I pay my bills, and also beliefs about ourselves. Am I enough? Can I be enough? Can I do enough? So I just feel so strongly that when we go back to the simplest purpose of life, joy, and that sounds fluffy, but it's actually not. Because if I begin to look around my life, around my house, around the work that I do and my relationships, joy is so honest. And it shines a light on the places where I've been lying to myself or to other people or pretending. And so if I begin to use joy as this compass back toward purpose, and purpose, by the way, I've stopped saying live on purpose. That feels like something way out in the horizon. When I finally get there, in my case, I've written enough books where, I'm seen as a successful author or whatever, then I'll feel like I'm living my purpose. I feel to change the preposition and say in purpose, which means I'm living in purpose right this minute, doing this with you.
Absolutely.
And in a little while, I'm going to go pick up my daughter, and she's going to talk to me about the tattoo that she's getting this afternoon, and I'm going to be very interested and curious about that. I'm going to have joy in it. That's living in my purpose for that moment,
Yeah, no, it's taking the appreciation to be in that moment fully.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so the misery is living, okay, so we were supposed to feel sadness, of course.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're supposed to not feel these feelings. But when we're feeling these sadnesses, it's usually for some kind of maybe mistruth that we're focusing on or not telling, a lie we might be telling ourselves or accepting.
Yeah, and a lot of people think joy and happiness are the same thing, and I don't feel that way anymore because happiness to me is like the burst of a geyser. And that happens sometimes. And that's wonderful, and we enjoy it. To me, joy is this aquifer that lies so far below the surface. And there's joy in hard things. And once I began to see it that way, I began to take joy in my life, in the puzzles and the hard things and the weird things of my life, because it's like I showed up here, this intelligence, this self, this raw craving for all the experiences. I wanted these Gordian knots. I wanted this weird shit. I wanted to figure it out. So joy to me is so much deeper. It actually runs below all these experiences. And when I stopped seeking for happiness and instead began to be in the presence of this deep, deep joy, it really changed. So now happiness comes more often, but it's not something that I'm chasing,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just easier accepted, more prevalent. It shines brighter.
Yeah, and it informs me, how can I experience joy in this, whatever this is? How can I experience joy in this? And a lot of times it just is a matter of really, and this is such a buzz phrase, but really becoming present in that moment, like not rushing past whatever I'm up to right now. If
Well,
I'm
because
walking, yeah,
it's so easy to, sorry to interrupt, but it's so easy to do that. We are so hustled and bustled and just trying to get through this thing to get to the next thing that we don't experience the moment.
right.
It's like being centered, being grounded, if that's what that is.
Yeah, like if I can just break up with this asshole that has been a narcissist and part of my life for so long, if I can just break up with this and then get on down the road and then lose 10 pounds at the gym, then I can go date and I find somebody who really see me as I am. And rather than saying, this moment, this challenge, this time that I have is trying to reflect something to me, and I can take joy in the idea that I'm learning and growing right now. And what if rather than rush through this breakup, for example, oh, I can't find any joy in a breakup. What if I can not abandon myself, not betray myself? What if I can hold myself as something precious and valuable? And then just notice how I'm growing stronger and clearer and more honest. There's joy in a sleepless night, lying there in bed, feeling all the feelings of that breakup and all the things, rather than rushing ahead and saying, oh, once 6 months from now, once I've got my beach body back and this asshole's no longer texting me, then I'll feel joyful. It's like that keeps joy always out there on the horizon. It's like a mirage.
Well, and we fool ourselves into thinking that there's some sort of arrival point.
Right,
There's no destination.
right.
It just never comes. It's several arrival points. It's constantly arriving.
Well, I feel like this kind of brings us full circle to when you talked about transformation, always becoming, Um,
I can
that
remember someone saying something about, you go through a transformation, and I thought, oh, it's just a one-time thing. It's not, and then oh shit, it's happening again. Oh God, I'm in a pupa once more.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I feel like we've kind of gone the whole circle. We talked about life, the universe, and everything, which is kind of great.
We have. I do want to get you to let us know a little bit about your book, The Creative Cure. Let us know when it's do a little shameless self-promotion.
Well, it's funny you should ask because I was searching today for somebody brought up a quote, and so I went looking. There's all these images with my name on them on the internet. So I'm like, I'll go see if I can find that one. And as I was doing that search, I actually saw The Creative Cure with its final cover for the first time on Amazon. And even though I'm the marketing director for the publisher who's releasing this book, I didn't know that. It's actually available for pre-order on Amazon right this minute, and Google Books and Barnes & Noble. So it's The Creative Cure, and let me just tell you the subtitle because I didn't write this part of it. The subtitle is How Finding and Freeing Your Inner Artist Can Heal Your Life. And this has a foreword by Julia Cameron, which just, I can't tell you how much that warms my heart. And, you know, Carrie, much of what we talked about today, you talked about shameless self-promotion. I mean, pretty much, you know, with the exception of, you know, diving into astrology or witchcraft, but pretty much the process and discussion we had today is what's contained in this book. The Creative Cure is in each of us already, and it's just aligning with that. You know, I feel so strongly that the self we've created to operate in the world, and it happens through socialization and through the fear of rejection or experience of rejection and through traumas. That self is really not the true inner self. It's like an alter self, and so a lot of people think, if I can heal myself, actually the only thing that needs to be healed is the connection to the inner self. And so the book, The Creative Cure, is really about healing that connection.
I really love that because it's true. We feel like, and I know myself at the beginning of, say, my understanding of what I was doing, I was just trying to put back the pieces together of how I started out.
Mm-hmm.
Before any of the things happened, before the wonder was, you know, stricken from my eyes or whatever the case is.
Yes.
I was just connecting. And so when you talked about, you know, connecting to that child, I'm immediately brought to playing with dandelions in the middle of the summertime, having scrapes all over myself and ripping open dandelions so that I could put their stuff all over my cuts because I thought that was curing me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who I was. Oh my goodness, you're going to love this. I walked into my neighbor's garage when I was maybe 4 years old and decided to play with all of their little cans of oils and things.
Mm.
Yeah, I wasn't very good. I got in trouble. But I mean, I was playing mad scientist in someone's garage or witch, whatever.
Yeah. Well, kind of like Hansel and Gretel, our inner self drops crumbs. It drops breadcrumb clues. And just like you just described, there were breadcrumbs, and it led you home to yourself. It led you home to what you took delight in, and also what you're made to do and be and create. Not just the one thing, not just the oils or the witchcraft or anything, but that's part of it. And those curiosities, those passions, you know, being led back to it, regardless of how much it does or doesn't make sense to the adult mind. Finding our way back to that actually does reveal what's true for us, you know?
Yeah, and that's where I found my joy.
Mm-hmm.
Reconnecting there
Mm-hmm.
at that point.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation. I really want to thank you for joining me today. Do you have anything that you'd like to say as a final note to our guests?
Wow, I just, you know, I do this on podcasts, and then I never have the right thing to say. Just, I love you. Thank you for being here. We need you, not the you think you're supposed to be. We need you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for coming onto the show and sharing your gift with my listeners. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for giving me the little pushes that I needed. Thank you for the tears that I cried while I read Manifesto. Manifesto, my brain. Blessed Are the Weird was honestly exactly what I needed to read. And I'm going to say something, and I don't know if I said it at the beginning of the show or if I said it to my husband before, but you are a wonderful example of a healed masculine giving direction in a positive patriarchal way. Does that make sense? Not in a patriarch, I guess that's the positive masculine energy that's sharing as a healed masculine should. It's very wonderful. It's very refreshing, and I appreciate you quite a bit.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you too, and thanks for this opportunity. I've had this is one of my favorite podcasts I've done. We've laughed at
Oh, you're a sweetheart. I absolutely adore you. I want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in today. on this beautiful first chatty Cathy day of sun in Gemini. Um, until we meet again, I will have Sarah DeHaven, which I wasn't going to share who was next. And I don't even know if I'm going to be able to end this because the last show I didn't know how to end it and I ended up swearing at the end of it. Y'all have a nice day and tune in next time. Until then, stay lifted.